Chief of Staff's come out to talk to us. Rodney Davis is here to give us kind of the vision that the PEO has going forward and kind of give us an idea of the kinds of things that we can expect in the future. So thanks, Rodney. Appreciate you coming.
It's good to be here. Yeah, Mr. Mason, I'm sure would like to be here, but he's coming back from Sedona this morning, so I think he probably had a better day than I had. I had a dentist appointment today, so. But yeah, we'll go ahead. We'll talk about where the PEO is headed. You just heard from Matt, and Laura's going to speak this afternoon. So there's there's more opportunities for questions. I'll defer all the hard questions to those guys, right? You'll come and talk to most of your room full of engineers, pick the econ guy to come and do that. So yeah, we need to step back a little bit.
Yeah, it's me.
So go ahead and go to the next chart. It is great that Dave had a chance to talk before I did, right? Because he set up some of the same themes that we're gonna see, right? That this is a really hard process, especially for the government. We'll talk through that. So just for us, is what does digital transformation mean to the PEO? Again, there are a lot of definitions. We had a kind of an offsite ourselves a couple weeks ago, and what does it mean, right? And I think at the most basic level for us is that we need to learn to make better decisions faster, right? And if we don't do that, and it really just isn't really transforming what we do. Then the governance and strategy mapping. How do we know where we're going, right? So there's a lot of documents that kind of lay that out. I'll talk to how those are laid out, and how we kind of draw a thread through those to where we are today and where we're trying. Then so finally, we're going to talk about just our initiatives and understand what we're talking about again. So again, it's very hard to keep everybody on the same page, right? You have a discussion, you walk away for a couple of days, and everybody comes back, and everybody's at a different point. Try to get there. We'll talk to a couple of charts that are really about Lars, right, and a little bit of Matt. And so if you have any questions with those guys, we'll bring them up then. Or the next chart. I think this is really important, and this is back to Dave's point, right? You can have the best technology in the world, right? You can go out and you can spend your money, right, and you can buy the tools, right? But if you don't have the right workforce and culture in place, you really just can't implement those tools effectively, right? And I think some of the things that Dave talked about, and I came from Chinook, and we struggle with some of these things, is you can get data in the way that you want it. It's very hard to disseminate it through the enterprise, right? And as a government, right, we're just not like a Boeing or a Sikorsky, right? I think most of those guys, you're in a company, and all your tools are the same, right? And for us, and Dr. Lewis knows this very well, right? That we bring data into the PEO network, we have to transfer that to the AVBIC network, and those things aren't always compatible, right? And even when we have access to a contractor document, it's very hard through our pipes to get that data in, right? We've talked about 24, 48 hours of trying to download data, and that's just not very reasonable, right? So we got a lot of work to do there, right? So, but again, I think key for us is understanding that we have to do the culture piece as well, right? And Matt talked about it, right? We have an aging workforce, right, that grew up in a different environment, so we have to get them trained to get the right tools in place to allow them to take advantage of what industry is doing. Critical to our success, right? So you guys can't see the bottom line because of the table in the front, but it says transforming culture without the right technology is impractical. Transforming technology without the right culture is impossible. So we're working on both sides of this, and we'll come back to a chart some of this to kind of talk about how we're pulling that all together in just a minute. So next chart, please. Talk a little bit about the governance and how we kind of got to where we are. So the one you can't see on the bottom is the National Defense Strategy 2018. Right, and again, we all recognize, and Matt said, budgets are going down, right? So we need to be more efficient in the dollars we spend in order to defend the nation, right? So we have to do things differently, right? If we just keep doing the same things, that gets to be crazy, right? So we all heard that before. There's also a digital engineering strategy that came out in 2018 to help kind of guide where we are. And I think you guys are probably tracking that pretty well. DoD came out with a digital modernization strategy in 2019, and that was followed just recently by the U.S. Army Digital Transformation Strategy. If you guys haven't had a chance to read that, I ask you to do that, because that is really a good document trying to tell you where we're going, right? But really, they're starting to look in a lot of places that we've never looked before, right? They're trying to look across the palm and see where all the dollars we're spending for digital transformation are, and try to get their arms around that. And they talk about collapsing networks, right? You know, going from, I think, 90 separate networks in the Army down to closer to one, right? So there's a lot of things that the Army's got to push, and then we have to be embedded in that if we're going to succeed, right? So in October 21, we have our strategic plan, and that's got to guide us to embed and do the things that these other documents talk to, right? You know, again, they establish, you know, the truth, right, through a single database, right? There's a lot of things that we have to do, and really in that little bottom thing you can't see, it's all wrapped around the people again, right? We've got to get that culture right and the right people in the right places to get that work done. So next chart. So these are our digital transformation objectives, and then we try to lay them out in a manner that went from the DoD strategy down to the Army digital strategy and then the PEO strategic plan. And you know, by and large, the first one on the DoD side is innovating for competitive advantage, right? So, you know, again, as we talk about competition across the world, right, we need to be in a place of advantage, not disadvantage, right? So in order to do that, we need to be different, right? And that flows across to the Army digital transformation strategy is modernization readiness, right? That, you know, we have to modernize our forces in software, and the things that we do are going to be different than they've been in the past, right? You know, a lot of our capability comes from new software drops, and we have to be more efficient and do those in a more robust manner, right? And for us, that doesn't necessarily track down exactly. You know, if you look at our three, right, build a future vertical ecosystem, ensure the readiness and relevance of the enduring aviation fleet, build partner nation capacity, those all kind of flow from that first one, right? We also have 5 other lines of effort that we're going to talk to that really get after the other 2, right? So the other one is optimize for efficiencies and improve capabilities from the DoD side, which that's reform in the Army digital strategy, right? And the final piece of both of those is really cultivate talent from a digital ready workforce and people and partnerships, right? And again, that's that same recognition that we have to be different in the people and the culture and our training, right? And if you guys have followed the Chief of Staff of the Army over time, right? He's trying to get out of the old model of everybody's in 11 Bravo or 15 Alpha, right? But what are the skills do you bring to the fight that are really critical, right? Because there's, especially on the reserve and the guard force, right? There are people that have secondary careers that are critical to what we do. We don't always acknowledge those. I was talking to a lady the other day, and she was trained as a nurse, but she also had an intel background. So when she got deployed with the Army, it kind of put them in a different perspective, right? That she has some different skills that we both needed, right? So trying to find a way to use those capabilities for maximum our benefits, right? So next chart. But I told you we come back to this chart and kind of talk about what we're doing. So in the middle of this chart now, we have the 5 lines of effort that we're working, right? So the first one is human capital, and there's a lot of things going on within the PEO and within the DoD in general. And the first one I want to bring up to you is I don't know if you guys have heard about back to basics, right? So I think everybody's familiar with DIWEA. This is the first major overhaul of DIWEA in a very long time, and they basically we transitioned over the last week or 2, right? So what we're really gone from is the old model of everybody having 3 levels of certification in all your different career fields, and we've dropped those down to a far fewer number of functional areas, and the training is spread over more time. The other thing they've done is they've done certifications, right? So instead of now, like in the past when I was young, right, we all became an active corps member. We all ran to get the training done as fast as we can, get level 3 as soon as you can, and then you try and put that behind you, right? And this current model is more, go back to class, right? And they have these certifications that expire over time, which is new for us, right? So if you get a certification in digital engineering, that's only good for 5 years. And so you need to go back and get that again or refresh yourself, right? And the other thing that we've talked about, which was unusual, is now we have the ability to tailor things for the Army, right? Or even in a different thing like aviation, right? So that, maybe across the Navy and the Air Force, we can get some more synergy out of people who are in the aviation field, right? So there's a lot of opportunities there for us. We're still working through that. We need to understand that. Another thing we're doing, human capital, again, it's not super sexy, but the data that we have on our personnel, right? Like probably everybody else, we have 4 or 5 places where the same data resides. We use it for different reasons, right? And inevitably that 5 of those are probably wrong, right? Because we don't all have that same source of truth, right? So for me, I go to a certain database, and for somebody else, we go to another one, right? We're trying to get those collapsed down to one, use that to feed everything else that we do, right? So we don't have this, how many people are in the PEO, right? Mr. Mason, you guys know him. He's been frustrated for a long time. I think we finally got a handle on how many people are in the. It took a while, right? Because we're core people, we're matrix people, we're contractors, and it's very hard to keep track of all those folks in a way that is cohesive if you don't have a single database. So we're getting to that point. Portfolio management. right? Portfolio management is trying to, operate the PEO where we serve the combat aviation brigades, not just a platform, right? So we're trying to say, hey, I want to bring a capability like ITEP. General Todd always talked about, it's great that if I bring ITEP to a Black Hawk and I field it to a cab, but if I don't give it to the Apaches, then the Apaches have a problem. And so I really haven't helped the cab that much, right? So the idea is I want to field a capability to a cab and allow them to go to the fight with a full capability, right? So I would tell you that, again, the way the planning and budgeting process is, that's a hard thing, but, are we there today? No, but we're better than we were, right? We're not having a plan, right? So we go to decision makers and say, hey, we can change our investment strategy this way to give you a better outcome for a cab, right? Sometimes that's practical, sometimes it's not, but at least we have that capability. You guys are also familiar with a cab AIL, right? So, the integration lab that is over that run by Al Abijan, right? And, we're pulling a lot of things in with Matt and Mosa to help folks on, project convergence, right? So we kind of established a regular battle rhythm with Al to kind of get everything kind of lined up to support those events cleanly, right? So, we're not just going to catch as catch can and go try and do, PC 22, right? We have a plan. We're going to try to execute that soundly. And so the other thing we're doing that we haven't done a lot of in the past is looking at the industrial base and supply chain risk management, right? So we've gone out to some commercial vendors. We've got some really good feedback on, where the supply chain is. And, it's probably, you guys would expect that it runs through places that we really don't appreciate all that much, right? That, a lot of things that we do come from places that we don't have the best relationship with. And so at least we can eliminate that problem and see what we can do about it, right? And I think just like a lot of other things we talked about today, for FBL, right, when you get into these programs, that information is great up front, right? When you're down the road and you already have your designs locked in and your source, it's a lot harder, right? But get that information early and act on it has been critical for us. Number 3 is business transformation, right? So, again, a lot of things we talk about can be in that realm, but, we are really trying to get our arms around how we do business on everything that we do, right, to be more efficient. Ray Sellers, right, tapped him right before he retired, right? He made a mistake of calling me and saying he wanted something hard to do. So for you guys who don't work in our business, right, we do what we call senior rater potential evaluation, right? And Mr. Mason is responsible for all the GS 14 to 15 level employees in the organization, which works out to about 275 of these documents that are supposed to be done in the space of about 90 days. We generally take about 270 days to get them done. And, we've managed it before through spreadsheets, through nothing, through luck. So Ray and we had a conversation, and it's not maybe the best approach today, but in the near term, we want you an access database, right? And, Ray really didn't know all that much about access, but we learned, right? And we made some progress, right? So it's looking at how we do things every day and try to do them better. The digital ecosystem, that's really my friend Lars back there. He's got, a lot of work to do. And again, a lot of these problems we've talked about today are all in that digital ecosystem. So I'm not going to beat that one to death. The other one is the product support modernization. That's being run of our G4. And really, we're trying to use Army data to make the aircraft, make aircraft decisions better, right? And support cabs. And so using Vantage and using Power BI on our side, we've really gained a lot of insight to the Apache fleet, right? And we've shared that with Dr. Markowitz and how we're doing, right? And some stuff that took us about, a week or two in cargo to do, Apache can do in about 3 seconds on the fly, right? They really have great insight into the airframe condition. They have real insight into which aircraft have habitually been poor performers on operational readiness. And, they were down to the point of being able to make decisions on, is this aircraft worth keeping, right? Or, hey, I need to induct an aircraft today. This is one I can afford to lose, right? Because this is in the worst shape, been the worst performing aircraft. So we're in the process now of, rolling that out to Chinook and to utility, Black Hawk fleet. And I think that's really going to help us really have a lot more insight. Because I think before we talked about, in the stacks of paper, we all had access to that information, but it's really hard to come by, right? So these tools are really helping us do that so more effectively. And even to the FBL side, if we can kind of work through the artificial intelligence, these kind of things with this data, be able to set ourselves up for those maintenance-free operating periods, right? We'll be in a lot better shape, again, because we'll use these pilot programs to kind of sort out how this is going to work for us. So I got a lot of work there, right? So, so again, back to the technology side, how that fits in, right? So again, we're capturing the digital thread with Lars. We're really pushing digital engineering from the headquarters, right? And that's really been a big change, right? Into like Formosa, right? The boss basically has come to the PMs and said, hey, look, at some point you're going to have to sub-optimize what you do for the betterment of the whole, right? So, Mosa is an example, right? You're not going to just run off and go get your software done, right? First thing we're gonna do is go have a conversation with Matt to make sure that, hey, we don't have this piece of software already ready to go, right? We're gonna, we're gonna go make that step. And if the answer is you're gonna fund most of the development effort, then that's what we're gonna go do, right? So that's been a big change for us. Talk about some of those other pieces in technology and the culture. We've got a digital and transformation office, Adrienne Day, many of you guys know. So she's over there working that for us. And you guys know she's a bulldog, she's tenacious, and she's gonna help us get to the finish line. Having stakeholder engagements, right? Again, again, we're reaching out to Dr. Markowitz and people like that to help us, kind of get on the cutting edge of that transformation and go where the Army's going, and kind of use what we're doing to help shape where the Army goes, right? So a lot of synergy there. And again, train the workforce. Again, if we don't have the workforce in place, it's really, really hard to get the things that, all the value that we can drive out of this operation. So with that, next chart, please. Understanding the lexicon, I spend a lot of time on this chart because I get lost in it pretty quickly. The model-based system engineering, like we talked about that a lot with Matt. And so again, I think that's probably the core of where we start, right? But the digital thread runs from the left side of that to the right side, right? And again, it's very in-depth, and again, I think at the end of the day, we'd like to be over on the far right where we're a digital organization, but that's a long road, a lot of work to be done. And we're going to continue to develop it, right, and see where we go, right? But I believe, that we can get ourselves pretty quickly into the, the digital engineering part of this diagram. I think the digital transformation, artificial intelligence is going to be a little harder. Do we have some things at play to try that? The Army's going to go to some data lakes and try to help work out that process, right? But I think there's some opportunities there for us that, if we can be ready to go at the right time, we will get those. And what you guys kind of can't see on the bottom is more of that digital thread, right, where it's running through the stakeholders, right? And I think go to the next chart, it kind of shows those stakeholders, right? And stealing one of the largest charts to a point, but what we're really trying to do is use the digital thread to weave the fabric that kind of keeps everybody, all the stakeholders together in one place, right? And as you guys know and talked about, right, that if we want to be able to receive models, right, from a contractor, at some point we're going to have to output those things back from AMCOM, right, for spare. Right, and we have to make sure that process is in place, right? So there's a whole lot of players in this space that we can't leave them behind, right? So there's a lot of communication, a lot of engagement, a lot of work we have to do to get everybody aligned to make this work. But again, I think the dividends are there. The Army wants to go there, so we're going to have to work to get there. So again, I think we're on the road, but this is a great way to look at where we need to get to, right? Because we can't forget any of these players, right, as we go. Next chart. And realize digital engineering, this is back to Lars and Matt, right? So they're working those key enablers, right? Those guys have the rose pinned on them. And, since they're here and talking to you, we're not going to dwell on this a lot, but I think that's my last chart. But really, those guys are really doing great work to pull us along. And, it's not going to be easy. There's got a lot of people who feel like they're getting left behind, right? But I think at the end of the day, the organization will be a lot better for this effort. Next one is just questions. So with that, I'll take any questions or defer those to Lars and Matt.
I'll start it out, Rodney. Thanks. No more. Thanks for coming. Yeah, appreciate it. There are certain pieces of this, and I really believe that was the genesis of the request for us to start looking at this as an organization. There are certain islands of excellence that exist already. I mean, going from MBSE to the digital engineering part as we develop an aircraft, has pretty much been invested in by the industry, right?
Right.
So how do you think there's a way to leverage that piece of it without having the whole shoot match going on and let that piece just mature itself, or is that?
Yeah, again, maybe get a little bit help for that, but I think there's a way, right? I think there's people who are doing pilot programs and pathfinders to kind of help us find a way to get there. Because again, it's like, we've struggled to get on, taking and receiving models, right? And I think a lot of times, when we receive a model, we break ourselves, right? And I think at some level, we're going to have to get to a collaborative environment. I think, Matt, if I'm not mistaken, I've been like, the Navy's kind of figured out a way to kind of do that, right? So I think there's ways to get there, but we need to be open to look around the entire industry and the DoD, find what works. Because again, I think what we always fall back on is, security is king, right? But getting things that work in the IL5 environment, right? Getting places where you can work collaboratively, and probably zero trust is probably a piece of that. Where CAT card's not the way to go, right? Because if I want a contractor on the network, I got to find a way to get him a CAT card, right? It's hard enough for us to get a CAT card right nowadays. So I think there are ways to get there, but we really got to be open and really have that communication across industry and in the DoD to get there, right? Because we need the best of breed ideas to help us find the path. Because again, there's a lot of challenges, but people are working through them, right? You give good people a challenge, they'll figure it out. Especially some of the types that we have.
Yeah. Okay. Questions for Rodney?
I was just curious on the previous chart where you had an acronym PLEM. PLE I usually hear is product line engineering, but
So product line management, Lars, you want to talk to that anymore?
Right, Garrett. I think that's it. Garrett's a good guesser. Thank you.
If you want, Lars will probably give you like 15 minutes on it later. Some of my best conversations during the day are with Lars.
All right.
That's sad. That's really sad.
Well, he loses me in the first 5 minutes, but it sounds really. But if you guys have any more questions, I'll turn it over to the next person. I know lunch is out there somewhere. So
Anybody? Online?
Nothing online.
Ronnie, thanks. Appreciate it. Yeah.